Mindset Game Podcast, and I'm your host, James Roberts. Before we get started with this week's show, first off, let me take this opportunity to welcome back the regular listeners. And if this is your first time listening to the show, I hope you enjoy this episode and decide to subscribe to the show. And on today's show, I've got James Vear. James is the current GB Under-16 head coach, and as well as that is one of the coaches at Barking Abbey, having joined them in the 2014-2015 season. So welcome to the show, James.
Thanks, James. Thank you for having me.
James, before we delve into today's episode, can you talk us through your journey, obviously, from the beginning to get into, obviously, where you are now of coaching the under-16s, but previously coaching the under-18s?
Yeah, sure. My family is a big basketball family. We all, me and my two brothers, I've got two twin brothers. My dad used to be a coach as well. So we were kind of given a basketball at the age of 5 or 6 years old. And pretty much since then, we've been pretty obsessed with basketball since that kind of period in our lives. So I played up until early 20s. And then from there, I moved into coaching. I started off my coaching at Sevenoaks Suns, which is predominantly a women's club now. But Tim Lewis and Rad Miller-Turner asked me to come down and help out with some coaching sessions there with their boys program. The next thing you know, I'm kind of running that program. And I kind of really found a passion for coaching from that kind of period onwards. From there, I moved to Medway Park Crusaders, which is now Canterbury Crusaders. Worked at their academy for a couple of years with Jesse Sazant, who has been involved in the national teams for a number of years too. And then from there, went and coached in Canada for a year at Dalhousie University with John Campbell, which was a great opportunity. And then from there, went to Denmark, coached there for a couple of seasons in the top pro league. Unfortunately, the club had some financial issues, so ended up coming back to London, where I've been working at Barking Abbey for the last 3 seasons. Also been involved with the national team since then, being the GB Under-20s lead assistant coach for 4 years. And now have taken the role of GB Under-16s head coach, which we've just finished this summer with pretty successful summer, finishing 4th and just missing out on promotion to Division A.
Well, I happened to chance and caught a little bit of that last game. Against who was it? Against
Georgia.
What was kind of the expectations for the team going in, and maybe say from the opposite side of that, the stuff that was put out of the media? Was it different expectations?
For me, the expectations are always going to be win every single game and try and gain promotion. So in my head, I didn't really have any other expectation than trying to do that. Now, the expectations maybe from outside of our own camp were that if we finished in the top 8, I think that would have been a positive kind of expectation for us. But I think that was due to, we had quite a few players pull out. We had Kareem Queeley, who plays at Real Madrid. He made himself unavailable for the team. And we had 3 or 4 players that ended up going to America to play high school basketball, so they had to pull out. So I think that when those players pulled out, I think that people from the outside thought that the expectations kind of would drop, and maybe that we weren't maybe one of the favourites for promotion. But having spent the time with the players and the group that we had, I knew we had some talent. It was just, I didn't know how good we were until we kind of got to the Europeans. And, you know, you win a couple of games there and you kind of get some momentum behind you. And then obviously you kind of, the draw is kind of in your favour as well. I think we had a pretty decent group to try and get through to the next round. And then after that, it's kind of, it's luck of the draw, you know. as you saw in that final game, it can come down to, a couple of free throws in the last 8 seconds, and that can be the difference between promotion to Division A and staying in Division B.
But also, James, do you think, like, with the outside expectation being so low, do you think it also would be a factor that it was GB's first tournament at that level?
Yeah, I can kind of see that. I mean, I try and not look at or listen to the outside expectations anyway. I kind of try and stay away from that as much as possible. I try and not speak to the players about expectation either. When they're 15 and 16 years old, it's you try and kind of stay in the moment. Try and talk to them about taking one game at a time, one training session at a time. So we very, very rarely spoke to the players ever about what the expectations of the team was. As a coaching staff, we very rarely sat down and said, where are we at? Are we this good? Are we a top 8 team? Are we a top 4 team? Are we going to get promotion? Have we got a chance of getting promotion? We very rarely spoke about that. I mean, I tried to, especially with the staff, tried to say to them, we're just going to take it every day, one day at a time and kind of see what happens. And then having been at quite a few European championships in the past with the under-20s, I think that's the best way to be. If you start looking ahead too far, it can be a little bit dangerous, so especially with, so many games coming at you in so many days, I think it's just, you got to take each day as it comes.
But from another perspective, James, would it not be difficult to be able to keep players in a bubble, so to speak, now with the likes of, well, probably predominantly Twitter?
Of course, 100%. It's hard for players, obviously. I mean, they're on social media. I mean, I'm a big person. I believe in social media. I think the players, we sit down and talk to them about, being on social media, being a positive role model on social media, using social media. So, of course, they're reading the stuff that is on social media, but also I think that maybe this year, maybe compared to all the other years past, I feel like there's been a huge amount of positivity on social media. And I think that the guys kind of fed off that, especially when you've got, we've got other coaches in the system, like Alan Keane and Andreas Kapoulis, who both had amazing summers with the 18s and 20s. Obviously, we kind of fed off that energy that they had, both of those teams getting promoted. I think that was really positive for us, especially when those coaches are, tweeting, they're doing video messages for us, all of that stuff's kind of positive for us. I mean, you can look at it as kind of maybe players looking at that as maybe, maybe a negative as there's a lot of expectation on them. But I actually feel like this group used it as positive. And we tried to use it as a positive as much as possible, that, if back home is kind of behind us and expecting us to win games, we're kind of, our guys kind of fed off that energy, I feel like, especially this summer.
But in terms of video messaging, say, from the senior guys, wouldn't you say that is to some extent normal, because there is sort of like a family, so they're going to try and give them as much support as they can?
Yeah, I 100% agree. I don't think that's always been the case in the past. I've done national teams now for, I think this would be my 6th year straight, or 5th year straight. And that hasn't always been the past, it hasn't always been the norm for the national teams. I feel like now we're kind of getting to a point where there is some synergy between, 16s, 18s, 20s and men's, where there is kind of, there's discussions between all of us. I speak to Alan quite a bit. Obviously, Alan was really successful with the 16s England team before, so I use him as much as possible as, to kind of get some ideas from him, things he's done in the past that have worked. Andreas, I work with the under-20s, and he's, just an amazing coach, and I speak to him a lot, and about things that's worked with them at the 20s, and I feel like that maybe that hasn't always been the norm in the past, and I feel like That's now becoming kind of, like we say, like a GB family thing, where we're all in this together. It's not just the men's teams as well, it's the women's teams as well. We're watching the under-18 girls games with our guys when they had their promotion game. I speak to Matt Harbour as well, and all these other coaches that coach with the national team, and hopefully this is something that we can develop, like a culture and like a GB family kind of going forwards, because I feel like in the past that hasn't always been the norm. Hopefully that's something we can continue to develop over the coming years.
But wouldn't you agree, James, that having that synergy from a coaching perspective, wouldn't you have thought that having that obviously that synergy between from all the way up from under 16s all up to senior men's would help with the athletes' obviously long-term development?
100% agree. I think it's something I've pushed for a number of years now. I mean, it doesn't have to be that all three teams are running, the same offense, or have, the coaches don't have to have, completely the same philosophies, but, it's about kind of having that culture all the way through, and you see that the other national teams, the really successful national teams, all have that. So I think that if we can continue to develop that, I think that's something that could be a real positive for the national teams going forward.
And probably to build on that point, do you see like the more established nations their younger players look to their senior players more as role models as opposed to looking at people, say, in the NBA?
Of course, 100%. I think that's something that we've got to continue to develop. It's something that we actually, with our 16s, it's something that I was really kind of keen to push to our guys. So we did a kind of exercise with our players that when we gave them their national team jerseys, we also gave them kind of like a A4 sheet of paper, which was laminated, which had some expectations on there, things that are important to us as a team, important to them as players, but also put down the bottom, players that have worn the jersey before them. So, like some of the players that have played before, like that, the players that are in the senior team now, like Andrew Lawrence, Kieran Achara, Drew Sullivan, all these guys. So the players can actually, relate to those players that have worn the jersey before them. So I'm a big believer in, using the senior players as role models. We've got some guys in there that are really great role models. I think it's something that our players should aspire to be, guys that are in the GB senior team. Hopefully that's something that they enjoy as well. I think that the senior players, I know quite a few of them. I think that there should be kind of almost a mentoring role, some of those senior players could, maybe take two or three of the younger guys at their position, maybe, talk to them a couple of times a year, give them some advice on things, check in on them, see how they're doing with their national league teams or teams if they're abroad. I think that's something that I think is important kind of going forward.
I think that's a good, what's the word I want? I think that you've implemented, obviously, with having the names of previous players have worn the jersey. I think the New Zealanders did that quite well, obviously at school level, with obviously their All Black representatives. So the kids get a sense of, like as you said, there's aspirations to, well, that player was once in the same position that I am in now. So it is obviously with hard work and dedication. It is a realistic goal and attainable if I work at it. And obviously, it's probably gives you a sense that it's not your jersey forever. It's you're playing for, be it your family, where you're from, and your country, and obviously you're setting probably higher standards for, say, the next person that's going to wear it.
Yeah, 100%. I'm a big, the whole All Blacks culture. I mean, a book that changed kind of the way I think about things, especially national team level, was, the James Vear legacy, which it was a great book. It's something I've read a couple of times now, and some of those kind of things that I read in the book, I've tried to, kind of put into what we're trying to do with the under 16s. So like you said, we've really tried to push to the guys, how much pride you should have wearing the Great Britain jersey. This was the first ever Great Britain under 16 team, and we kind of really pushed to the guys that you're the first ones and you set the standard for the next team that's coming in. And like you said, exactly what you kind of try to find that motivation for them as well. It might be, their parents, might be their brother and sister, it might be their teammates back at their club, So yeah, big believer in all that kind of, the All Blacks culture stuff.
Well, it's one thing to remember as well. It's at that level, it's probably to savour the moment, because with anything, it could be gone in an instant with an international career.
Exactly, and it's who's to say that all these players will go on to play national team level or under 18 level? I mean, not all of them will. This might be their one time that they play for their national team at any kind of level. So yeah, of course, you've got to savour the moment and kind of stay in the moment. And big thing for us as well at national team level is they got to have good experience. I really wanted to push to them that I want them to have a positive experience playing for the national team. I think in the past that hasn't always been the case, and we've lost kids early on in their development, and some players have never really kind of come back to national teams at the more senior level. I mean, working with the under 20s, we've had players that we've kind of gone after and said, look, we want you to come into camp and play for us at a Europeans, or at least try out. And some of them have said, you know what, my experience at national team level hasn't been good. I don't want to come in. I'm not interested. I'd rather just stay at my club and work out, or, if they're abroad or in America and Europe, they just want to stay there. So, I mean, I know that speaking with Alan and speaking with Andreas, it's something it's important to all of us that all the players have a positive experience with the national team.
And Jamie, when you say a positive experience, what are some of these? Well, obviously it's a case-by-case scenario of bad experiences, but when you say a positive experience, what do you actually mean?
I want them. I mean, with me especially, the players and the coaches would admit I'm incredibly tough on the guys. Like I expect huge things out of them. But I'm deadly honest with them, I don't try and lie to them. I'm not going to try and say to a player, you're going to play 25 minutes a game when I know that they're not going to. I'm very honest with them what their role will be. I really want them to have a positive experience with their teammates. So I want them to make lasting relationships with their teammates. I feel like that's something that this group, I hope, will continue to do. A lot of them had never met before. It's the first time as a group a lot of these players have been together. So hopefully, you can start some long-lasting kind of friendships going forward. I think it's the same thing, relationships with the players as well for us as coaches. I want to continue to build relationships with these players going forward, just because, they now move up, a lot of them, into the under 18s. Doesn't mean that we can't continue to talk to them. If I'm always here for any kind of advice, just someone to talk to. And, I feel like that's, for me, is a positive experience if they can go away from the national team, kind of having that at the end of it. I mean, people will obviously think positive experience will sometimes mean, that they played a lot or something. That's not always the case. Not everyone can play. And of course, there'll be players on the team that we've just had at the Europeans who wanted to play more. And they'll be disappointed that they didn't. But that doesn't mean that they didn't have a positive experience. And hopefully they will take that into the next stage of their national team career.
I think you bring up a good point there, James, in terms of it's how you define, obviously, positivity. They've obviously been the first team to represent it at that level. That is a positive in itself. And obviously, I've never been to Bulgaria, so it's a plus on that perspective. It's from competing at national level, you get to probably go to places that you would never, maybe never dream of, or maybe never even think of going to as well. So it kind of opens doors in that retrospect.
Exactly, and a lot of the time when we get them at under 16 level, this is the first time that they will. And one of the big things that we try to explain to them as well, from being in this experience, is to kind of take away like things off the court as well. Like we do work with them on like S&C side. Like how they need to develop their body over the next year to 2 years, how their diet should be. That's a big one for us, especially. Sometimes these kids come in, they have absolutely zero idea of how to be a sportsman. So for us, I think a lot of it is teaching and kind of developing that side of it as well, to explain to them that because a lot of them will never had that at all. I mean, they're still obviously 14, 15, 16 years old. This will be the first time they've come into an environment where they're almost treated like a professional athlete. They're going to be at times training twice a day when they're with us. They're going to have to understand about recovery, understanding about sleep, how much sleep they should get. Some of them, we talk to them about taking naps in the afternoon before games, and all these things. These are the things that hopefully that they can take away from the national team experience, and then continue to do that when they have their season coming up with National League or whichever country they're in.
But James, would you not agree it's a bit late implementing things like that at national level? Do you think maybe, and you can't probably generalize across every club, but say maybe the higher echelons of some of the clubs, I know especially the ones that are competing in, what's the name of it? The EABL.
EABL, yeah.
Implementing things like that anyway?
And 100% agree. And do you know what? A lot of the players already know it. I'm not saying this is a generalization that every single player that comes into our squad doesn't know these things already, because some of them are already at they're already at academies, but some of the players are not at academies yet. That's the issue. Some of them will have not joined an academy yet, and this will be their kind of their last year before they go into an academy. So some of them don't know. And I think that's a really good point, is that we've got to do a better job as a federation into going into national league teams. It doesn't just have to be, I mean, the academy system has grown so much over the last 3-4 years that, I mean, it's arguably the best run league out of all the leagues in the country now. I feel like we've got to do a better job of getting into national league teams and talking to the coaches there, kind of making them understand, the things that we're doing at national team level, and getting them involved. Like a lot of these coaches, I think will probably, if you ask them, feel like there's a little bit of a disconnect between themselves and the national team. I think us as coaches can do a better job of, speaking to the coaches, the National League coaches that coach these players week in, week out, going in and actually, watching their sessions, explaining to them the things that we're trying to do at national team level, things that are important to us, if we want to be successful as a national team. So, it's all about education, coach education. It's also the essence, like you said, like the other stuff. The S&C side, the nutrition side. I'm pretty sure National League coaches, they probably only get their players maybe twice a week, 3 times a week for a couple of hours. It's going to be hard for them to be able to teach them all this other stuff as well on top of the basketball. So I think if we can, as a federation, get into these clubs, help them out with that side of things, like I said about the mentorship stuff, I think it's important that the coaches also are seen to be mentoring other coaches. The strength and conditioning coaches is the same. Hopefully they can mentor some of the strength and conditioning coaches that are coming through. And if we get that kind of, like we spoke about the synergy between the national teams at 16s, 18s and 20s, if we can get some synergy between the national league teams and the national league coaches into the national teams, I think that can be a real positive for us.
But James, you say there's that some of the coaches feel that there's a disconnect between, say, the National League and the national program. I disagree with that to some extent because, obviously, as we touched upon with Twitter being probably a negative thing from expectations, it's probably from that perspective, be it not every coach is going to be on Twitter or social media.
Yep.
The ones that are is probably using that influence, what the kids will do anyway, is maybe using it as a resource. And obviously, like I've done with yourself to get the interview, is touch base with that person and using it to an advantage.
Of course. I agree with you in that sense that Twitter and, Facebook, all these things, there's a huge amount of resource out there for coaches if they want it. But not everyone's on Twitter. So it might be difficult for some people to be able to do that. Maybe some people don't feel comfortable being able to do that, directly message someone and say, I need some help. How do I do this? How do I do that? I think that we need to do a better job doing directly. I'm not sure if that's something that not only is, of course, if anyone direct messages me and says, can you help me with this? I'll do my best to try to be able to do that. But obviously we as coaches all have time constraints ourselves. We have our own teams. We had a huge amount going on during the season as well. I feel like as a federation, we can do a better job of maybe, connecting it all together a little bit easier, coaching clinics. How many coaching clinics do we have in this country? Hardly any. Do we have a national team coaching clinic, where all the national teams kind of coaches get together and, all coaches can come in and ask questions? I feel like we should make it a mandatory thing, In other countries, you have to attend a certain amount of clinics per year to be able to get your coaching badge. I feel like things like this need to be done for us to grow, to grow coaches in this country. For me, I'm very passionate about growing the younger coaches because, that's where the game's going to get better. If your coaching is really good at the very, at the youth level, when I get kids at 15, 16, if they've been taught the right way, fundamentals, if these coaches have done a really good job with these players when I get them, then obviously it makes my job a lot easier. I just feel like that we can do a better job with those kind of things going forward.
And do you think to some extent coaching clinics is shunned upon from maybe the, not say to, so to speak, the younger coaches, but to say the ones that assume that I won't say they know it all, but they're more experienced. So it's I can't really learn anything from anybody else because I've done it myself.
Well, then I don't know if they're in it for the right reason. And if that's my personal view. But as a coach, you can continuously learn throughout your entire career. It doesn't matter how old you are, you can learn something new every single day. If there's coaches there that think they're too good to go to a coaching clinic, then I don't think that's a valid response, and maybe they're doing it for the wrong reason. You don't get that kind of approach from coaches abroad as much. Like I said, there's places in Europe where you have to attend a certain amount of clinics to be able to get your coaching badge. Our coaching badge system doesn't work. I put it that plainly, that honest. It hasn't changed in 15 years. We've had the same coaching system for 15 years. Level 1, 2, and 3, for me, if you're trying to be a serious coach, I don't think it's good enough. I think it needs to change. Hopefully that's something that can maybe change in the next couple of years. I just don't feel like it does a good enough job of developing coaches. If I'm honest with you, I've done my level 1, 2, and 3. Have I learned anything in those level 1s, 2, and 3 that have really helped me to develop as a coach? Probably not. So that's where I think that maybe the system needs to change from the top for us to to get better.
Do you think from that sense, James, and it focuses maybe too much on the theory aspect of the game as opposed to, well, in all reality, a game is not that to the letter of the law. It's not that to those constraints.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's more of a, they're maybe too easy as well. Like I remember when I went to Canada for the year, and I was shown their coaching badge structure, and I mean their level 1 course, which is their kind of basic, first level course, was tougher than our level 3. So for me, I think that the level 1, 2, and 3 are more of a kind of let's get as many coaches on the books as possible. I don't know if that's something that needs to be done. We need to have more numbers, instead of thinking about, level 1 and 2 are decent for people who have never really, they're more for me, more of a PE teacher course. They're more for for people that have never really played basketball, know a little bit about it here and there, but they want to learn, they want to be taught the very, very basics, and they serve a purpose for certain people. I just feel like if you are a serious coach, now don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that you shouldn't have to do those courses as well, but there's got to be more development areas, or there's got to be more areas for coaches to develop. Just having level 1, 2, and 3 isn't enough at all. There's got to be, I think there's got to be a restructure in the way that we develop coaches, because at the moment, I don't think it's good enough.
But what bolt-ons would you add to it, James, to make it? Because, like you said, that in Canada, their level 1 is harder than level 3.
Then that's the way it's kind of got to be. I mean, for us to be able to develop and get better coaches, you've got to maybe make it harder to find out which coaches really want to be coaches. I don't like to kind of compare us to other nations, but you look at the Spanish course as well. I mean, the Spanish course is very in depth. It's not easy. It takes a lot of hard work to be able to go through the different badges, to go to. I mean, you've got to go to a certain amount of clinics per year. You've got to, and all of this is done obviously at your own expense. The federation isn't paying for you to do this, but then if we make it harder, maybe then we find out which are the coaches that really want to be coaches. I mean, a lot of the coaches these days obviously are not paid. They do it out of the love for basketball. The first 7-8 years that I coached, I barely made any money. I was driving, I'd work 9 to 5, and then I'd travel 2 hours to go to practice. I'd practice for an hour and a half, travel back, get back at 2 a.m, wake up and do it 3 times a week. I find like if we've got to make these coaching badges more difficult, but also they've got to be better for the coaches. We've got to be able to develop the coaches. I mean, I go watch quite a few youth games. I try and see what's going on, especially in London. I try and watch some, the under 16s, under 14 games, and some of these games they terrify me, if I'm honest with you. We've got coaches teaching 14-year-olds 20 different sets. I've watched an under 14 game where a player missed a layup, the coach subbed him off and made him do 10 push-ups in front of his teammates. I don't think that these coaches are bad, like they're bad people or bad coaches. I just don't think they've been taught, how to coach. Have they been told by the federation that under 14 level, it's not about winning, it's about developing players? I don't know. You'd have to ask those guys themselves. But yeah, it's a big area that I'm kind of passionate about. I think there needs to be lots of changes. I've been pretty outspoken about it over the last couple of years. I think there is changes being made, and hopefully those changes will kind of, some of the things I'm talking about, hopefully they will be put in, over the next couple of years.
I think you raised two good points there, James, in terms of obviously looking at it from an under 14 perspective. I think when you say they're doing 20 sets, I think at that age, maybe that's too much in terms of you're going to get confused in terms of what you're actually trying to do. And like you say, it's all about development. And probably at that age, it's probably too overwhelming. And probably at times that could probably make somebody give up on the sport. It's like, oh, this is too difficult because the coach is expecting me to learn all this.
Yeah, but it's the whole thing as well. I'm on the FECC at the moment, the FIBA Europe Coaching Certificate, and we speak to. I've made some great contacts in that, and I speak to other coaches from Europe, and when we tell them the stories, about how some of our kids at under 14 level are doing this, this, and this, they're kind of almost shocked because their federation or themselves as coaches is purely about development at that age, under 14 level. Of course, you want to teach them about the importance of winning and losing. We don't want to take that away, but it's very important at that level. You have very good coaches that they're confident in their ability as a coach to be able to say, do you know what? We're not going to run sets. We're going to develop the players. They're going to run a motion-based offense where it's about, reading the defense. There's going to be, no ball screens, no off-ball screens. We're just going to play. But it takes confident coaches to be able to do that, And one thing I took away from when I first started coaching, I went and spent some time at Gran Canaria we were with the England under-18 girls team, and the Gran Canaria women's coach, who at the time was the women's Spanish national team coach, he said something to me that kind of stuck with me ever since he said it, was that in his club and in a lot of the clubs in Spain, their best coaches coach their under 10s, under 12s, under 14s. Because he said that's the most important age for them. Because that's the age when they get to do all, the development side of things, teach them the fundamentals. But they always he was very passionate about putting their best coaches in with the very, very young kids. And then when you get to the older age groups, by that point, they've already been taught the fundamentals. They know the style of play. They know the way they should play. And then obviously when it's under 18 seniors, it becomes a lot easier. So yeah, I think that's something that we could do a better job of in England for sure.
But you could probably go one step further than that in terms of, like you say, they focus on development. And thus, I think it probably enables a player to be able to see what's in front of them and adapt. I think, but by implementing the system that we use, I think you're instilling probably a robotic style of play as they get older, and they can't probably adapt to situations they maybe have not seen before.
Yeah, 100% agree. I mean, I feel like at under 14 level, even you could get to a point to under 16s, but there should be kind of, I feel like, strict rules of the way that teams can play, almost, we talk about England having a style of play. Do we know or GB is a style of play? Maybe we need to do a better job of, implementing at under 14 level. This is the way that this is the way you can play. This is the way you're going to play. Everyone's going to play man-to-man defense. There's no zone, We're going to play a motion-based offense, no pick and roll at that age. We're going to play full-court defense. I don't know what it is, but I feel like that when we, like you said, we get kids at certain age groups, 16, 18s, and they have a robotic way of playing. Their decision-making is not great because they've never really had to make decisions when they played at their age group. Maybe their coach, their national league team has, a set where they catch the ball on the wing and every single time they get it, they just attack and score. I don't know what it is, but I completely agree. I feel like we've got to do a better job of developing the younger kids and I think that comes back to, for me, a lot of time it comes back to the coaches that coach at that age group.
But James, wouldn't it not be difficult to instill a certain philosophy of playing more so from the offensive perspective now? Because you're gonna have to implement a certain style of player to suit.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a big believer in saying that we have to play a certain way. You know, I don't feel like that's the way that we should go. But also, it's, you know, if we're getting the coaches together and we're saying to them, you know, it maybe not necessarily a style of play, but like, this is the kind of things that we're teaching at national team level. You know, like it might not be anything too structured and detailed, but it might be, you know, some things that are important to us, you know, like on-ball defense, you know, something that we concentrate on. We're pretty good at a national team level at on-ball defense. We're athletic, we're quick a lot of the time. So these are the things that as a national team we coach. Now, hopefully the coaches might be able to develop that in their own clubs, you know, the same way. Offensively, maybe similar things, you know, we're, you know, style of like we're pretty decent off the dribble. You know, we need to improve. Like at the younger age groups, I feel like two areas that we're not very good at: passing, footwork. We need to get better at these two things. Decision making. These are the drills that we use at national team level with our clubs, or when the kids come in. These are the things that we look to do with them. Maybe you and then showing the coaches the things that we do, and then hopefully they can use that. I mean, put their own spin on it. And then hopefully they can use that to develop the players at their own clubs.
Would you think that as a federation then they need to maybe look to create a resource, obviously from a social media perspective, say website based now, look to not film obviously the entire national programs session, because that's quite dangerous if it got leaked in certain circumstances, but look to look at those type of drills. And obviously that the coaches then have that resources. You got to maybe say a login password and password you get as a National League coach, and you're able to look at that resource as and when you need to. Yeah,
something like that would be good. I still think that, I mean, I always open my I open up all my national team practices for coaches to come and watch. And they can come and watch any of them, you know, like as long as they tell me beforehand that they're coming, they're more than welcome to come to any session. What worries me is I've opened it up and not many coaches come. Now, obviously, it might be late notice that I do that, but, you know, like that was a big area where I learned, was going to watch other coaches practice. I think that, I don't know if we make that a national, you know, like if you're going to be a National League coach and you want to get your level 2, that you have to attend 2 national team practices that year. I don't know. Maybe that's something we could do as well. I mean, I think that going to watch other coaches' practices is a big resource. I think that's something that maybe the federation again could maybe make that a prerequisite if you're trying to get your next badge or whatever it might be.
Well, I think it's from a development standpoint as a coach. I think it's a good one because you can see things develop because the players are that much better, so to speak, than probably in all essence they probably are. They're going to execute drills, plays that much better, and you can see it at full speed.
Yeah.
And see if it does break down, you're going to obviously stop it and say, well, and probably maybe question the players. Why did you do this? I was supposed to be doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's something. Yeah, I mean, we had a camp in Manchester, and we actually had some coaches travel all the way from Plymouth to watch our national. They spent a weekend with us, and you know, like got a hotel, did it upon themselves. You know, came to every single training session. Like things like that, I think are real positive, you know, and speaking to those coaches afterwards, I said to them, hopefully you've taken something away, and they all were really positive about it. And they were the same as kind of what I've said. They've said, you know, we want more. We feel like more coaches should do this. It would be beneficial for more coaches to be able to come and watch practices, national team practice.
And on to like the next part of the segment, James. Mark Stewart. I spoke to Mark Stewart. We've been a while back now, but he was saying you and Barking Abbey are very good at obviously developing your players and kind of opening their eyes from, say, their next level of development, so say be it high school in the US and obviously the collegiate level. Why do you think Barking Abbey are probably the leading figures at doing that in the UK?
I think that first of all we have a really good staff there. Lloyd Gardner and Mark Clark, who's just been made GB Performance Director, are two very, very good coaches, very good people. They, the big thing that when I first came there, one of the things that I really the first thing that I saw was that they were very much into development over winning, which was a really big thing for them. It was about developing the players. It wasn't necessarily about winning games, which for me was quite difficult for me to actually kind of get my head around that, because I had just come from Denmark and I was at the pro level, and at that kind of level, it's all about winning. It doesn't matter about the development of players, because you've got to win games, and if you don't win games, you get fired. So for me to see that, it was a full 180, and see, that this club was all about, young players and developing them to make them better and putting them in situations that were difficult for them. So at Barking, a lot of times we throw kids in at a level that maybe is, some people might say, well, that's a bit too high of a level for them. But for their development, it's best for them. Now, we might lose games because of that, like we might put some kids that are, 15, 16 years old and play them at Division 1 men's EBL 1. Now, that might be, that's tough for them, and they might struggle at that level. But for their development, it's the best for them, and I think that's something that I think we do a pretty good job of is pushing the kids and putting them in situations that are difficult. And I think that we kind of reap the rewards of that later on, because a lot of times when maybe they play men's level and they're 15, 16, when they then play against their own age group, or they go back to their national team at that age group, it's a lot easier for them. So I feel like that's kind of something that we do a pretty good job of, is, maybe not taking the easy route and playing them, in an age group where they're going to be really successful and, be the best player on the team. We put them in a difficult situation where it's going to be tough for them. And I think we do a pretty good job of that.
But would you not say that, the ones that are kind of shunning that approach are being a little bit short-sighted and maybe looking at the here and now? I know we did touch upon this as a positive at national level at the beginning, but maybe at club level, it's probably not always the right way of doing things, as opposed to looking at what's best for the athlete and their long-term development.
And that's the big thing, is having that, that we've got to think long-term instead of short-term. A lot of the national teams in Europe, they're thinking long term. I mean, I was in Slovakia watching the under-18 Division A European Championships, and speaking to some of the coaches there and watching the games. There is a couple of the teams were just, incredible basketball. And speaking to the coaches that coach these teams or around these teams, all of those players play men's. Like they're 16, 17 years old and they're playing semi-professional men's basketball. And that's even speaking to when we were just at our under-16 tournament. You look at the Greek team that we lost to in the semi-finals, and you speak to their coaching staff. Most of those players play men's basketball, and I think that that's something that when we played against them, you really saw that. You know, they're physically just they're so much more developed than we are. That because and I think that's a lot to do with they play men's basketball. You know, and that's the same thing. It's they've got a long-term view of, do you know what, it's going to be tough for them, and some of those players don't play huge minutes for these men's teams. You know, they're not the best player on their team, but if they played under 16 level in their own respective country, they're just going to dominate. It's going to be way too easy for them. So, like you said, we've got to have more of a long-term development view than just a short-term one.
And obviously, you mentioned the Greeks. Was it predominantly the forwards or across the board?
Oh, it was across the board. They were just a physically dominating team. I mean, they looked like a men's team. They really did. I mean, we prepped for them, and we thought of, you know, schemed ways that we thought that we could, you know, attack them, and, you know, but ultimately, I mean, there was a point in the game where their point guard is switched out onto our big man, and he's posting up our big man, and that's their point guard. And that kind of, you know, that physically just a big dominating team. And you know, like I mean, Greece is a huge basketball nation anyway, and you know, they weren't a Division B team; they were definitely a Division A team. But you know, you speak to their coaches, and they've got a big, you know, a long-term development plan. You know, they're not thinking about what's, you know, like winning under 18 leagues with those players. They're thinking about, you know, those players playing men's. I mean, one of the players that was the MVP of the tournament, I think he's already playing like very high level pro men's and playing significant minutes. And that kind of shows you where they are, you know, compared to us.
So do you think, from a development standpoint and probably a league system, do you think the federation needs to look at it and maybe give the whole thing a shake-up?
Definitely, 100%. I mean, you might have to look at it on a case-by-case basis. I don't know if you look at it, you know, player by player, and someone takes a lead and says, you know what, this player, you know, if we start to see that there's, you know, some players that shouldn't be playing, you know, there's a player that's, you know, scoring 40 points a game at under 16 level. Is that helping his development? 100% not. Then someone needs to, I don't know if it's someone from the federation, it's the national team, wherever, it says, right, you need to now play him at a different level. Like, he needs to play, you know, 2 age groups up, an age group up, or he needs to start playing, you know, low level men's basketball. But I think there needs to be a shake up in that. Or does it come down to, again, is it coach education? Is it telling these coaches, you know, like, this kid, for his development, you should be pushing him to play under 18s or play men's? I don't know, but there definitely needs to be some sort of shake-up.
And there's one I did raise when I got the guys on from Under Pressure podcast. We discussed, obviously, the, you know, as in focusing primarily on one person playing, let's say I can't speak, playing one position when they're younger, obviously, because of they're more athletic, they have a massive not stunting growth, have a growth spurt at a younger age. Obviously, from a development standpoint, that's not good for them in the long run, because they might max out at their height. Obviously, if they're a bit bigger, stockier person, they're not able to. Maybe if a coach solely puts them, say, as power forward or center position, and then they don't grow, it's obviously the coach is looking at here and now. Okay, from a winning perspective, you're going to do that, but obviously from that person's overall development, you're thus probably cutting them off at the knees, because they've got nowhere to go. Say the other guys grow, and they were guards per se, and now they've got that skill set of a guard, and probably at an older age, that player is now better than you, and they've got more developed skill set.
Yeah, 100%. And that's, like at those younger age groups, it's about playing, like I said, under 14 level, there shouldn't be coaches running multiple sets. It should be a motion-based offense, wherever it's, a 5-out offense where there is no, traditional back to the basket big, whether you play four out, one in, and, that one player in is interchangeable between every single player. But, that, like you said, that's exactly the way it should be. And, those tall players, those kids that are, big for their age should be being taught everything that the smaller players are being taught, guard fundamentals, and vice versa. The smaller players should be learning all facets of the game. But once again, it's, I think it comes back to a lot of the time, it's coach education, like, are they being taught that at a very young level, under 14 practices? Are they being taught the fundamentals? Are they being taught, how to run a basic 5-out motion offense, 4-out, 1 in? Or is the coach rolling the balls out and saying, right, we're just going to scrimmage, play 5-on-5. Here's the sets we're going to run. I don't know. But I feel like that all of those kind of questions that you're asking definitely come back to the coach education and the coaches being told that that's what they've got to do. I mean, I don't know.
But James, would you not agree that, say, back to the basketball to some extent is a dying art, with obviously focusing primarily on the 3-point shot?
Yeah, I mean, we have these talks about it all the time as coaches. We talk about, but trends come and go in basketball. Like at the moment, the trend is, you play small ball. You don't have a traditional center that's back to the basket. The other trend at the moment is, everyone runs pick and roll. Everyone, that's the way that basketball's gone over the last, 4 or 5 years. But trends come and go. At the moment, that's the way that kind of the NBA is playing. But we're not the NBA as well. That's the other thing is, I still think that there is room for back to the basket basketball. If that's, if you have a player that can do that, then why not utilize it? It's for me, it's, I think we get a little bit too tied down with, this is the style of play for the moment for the whole of the world. We must conform and play to this way. But I still feel like, the way that the game has gone, with the kind of small ball and, not having maybe a traditional center, also you can see it as a positive though, because you watch some of these guys now that, 7'3", 7'4", like Porzingis, for example, 7'3", and he plays like a guard. He can do everything just because, players see that now he can shoot the 3-point shot, he can attack off the dribble. He can still play back to the basket as well, and I think that that's a positive as well. You look at it that side that, now you can't just be like maybe a player that, is just back to the basket. Maybe you have to have a post game, but you also have to be able to handle the ball. You have to be able to shoot the ball pretty well. You have to be able to be a pretty decent ball handler. You can't just be, like you said, just a back to the basket guy. So, the way the game's gone is, everyone is so good now at everything, that, I feel like that can be a positive too, that, players see like players like Porzingis and, Dirk Nowitzki, all these kind of guys that are not maybe a traditional back to the basket guys, but they can do everything, and hopefully that's like an inspiration to players that even if they are, the tallest player on their team, they still want to be able to be, they want to get better at ball handling. They want to be a better shooter, they want to get better at their footwork. They want to be a better passer. So you can see it in a positive way as well.
I think if we kind of go back to say it from you're implementing a system, I think it's very much utilizing the skill set that you've got available with the players you have, and then thus implementing a system that works with best for you as a team.
Definitely, 100%. And that's where you can. you can talk about style of play at national team level, but ultimately, year on, year out, it's going to be different, isn't it? Like you're not always going to have the same 12 players that are going to play the same way, So and that's part of coaching, finding, looking at the team and thinking, right, how can we be successful? What kind of system is going to suit this team? And so on.
And I think we're speaking to Mark as well on the previous episode. I think with retrospect to Barking Abbey, I think from probably a long-term athlete development plan, I think Barking Abbey does a good example of that, because you kind of open the eyes of the player, obviously saying, well, okay, you've got this route to go further in your career in the US, and obviously you guys go and play over there, and they can kind of see what the level is at that level, and they can kind of judge, well, I need to maybe work on something.
Yeah.
Or this level is maybe, well, I would never be negative in judging something, but maybe they think that, okay, I'm maybe not quite up to the level of that. Maybe I should look at going to further education in the UK.
Yeah. And that can be a real eye-opener for them as well, is, when you go over there and you see kind of, the level that the guys will be going up against, some of them, they look at it and they're like, yep, this is going to be really tough if I want to get to this level. But also some of them will look at it and think, like you said, maybe it's best to stay in further education in the UK. Or some of them maybe even think, maybe style of play-wise, maybe I'm better suited to staying in Europe, and looking at that route. I think that sometimes players think that, America can kind of be the be-all and end-all of basketball. And sometimes that doesn't always suit every single player. It's not necessarily, that's not always the best route for every single player to take.
But would you say that is because of culture, be it that they've never been away from home for long periods of time?
Yeah, I think it can be that as well. It's also, educating the player as well, we obviously at Barking try and send players to America as much as possible, because one of the other things which is a real huge kind of pull for the American college system is they get their education paid for. It's 4 years of not only amazing facilities, really good coaching, the culture side of it, like you said, amazing experience, and all of their education paid for. I mean, why wouldn't you want to be kind of going over there? We can't, as a nation, we can't offer that. I mean, there isn't any countries in the world that can really offer that except for America. They're quite unique in being able to offer that experience, but it's not for everyone. It can't be for everyone.
But I think one of the episodes I had on, they raised a good argument in terms of that, coming from the American system, in terms of if you are, say, this is maybe using the American example, good enough to, say, skip the level and go to the NBA.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you get hurt in that essence, you've got a guaranteed contract. Whereas if you got hurt in college, you're done. And obviously, you've gone to university on a sports scholarship, not an academic scholarship. So obviously, from even an academic point now, you've kind of got nothing. So I can kind of see that argument. Mm-hmm. However, maybe from a European perspective, the contracts are not nowhere near anything on the lines of what an NBA team would offer somebody coming straight in. But kind of maybe looking at maybe that as another avenue to go down, maybe playing professionally even in this country.
And I think that's a really good point, is that hopefully long term we can offer players a route to be able to play professionally over here. I feel like I don't think we don't really offer that. I don't think we do. I mean BBL teams might be able to kind of educate me on that a little bit better. I mean, from an outsider looking in, I don't think we kind of offer that really. We don't offer, we have kids that are, 16, 17, 18 years old that are all going off to America. is there an offer for them to, sign a pro contract in England that's worthwhile, like that will be, like a full-time job, and do they link that, maybe with education, can they do I think the only one I can think that comes to mind, is Leicester Riders kind of do something, they have the link with Loughborough and, maybe that's, maybe they do something similar to that. I wouldn't know. I mean, you would have to ask them. But I feel like if we can get the pro setup incredibly professional, with all the teams, incredibly professional, maybe that's something that we can look to do. Give the players another option where America isn't always the be all and end all. It's maybe they have the option to stay in this country and sign a pro contract here.
But do you think it was maybe a catch-22? Because obviously you have worked at the professional level, and obviously there it is very much about winning and losing. However, the argument you could say with the BBL, there is no relegation, so it's not as constraint as some of the other European leagues. Say if you lose, if you are, like you say, your head is on the chopping block in terms of you're going to get fired if you lose, and worst case scenario, you're going to get the team relegated, whereas that is not the case in England. Yeah,
it's not the case, but it also takes, it might take a brave team or a brave owner or a brave coach to turn around and say, you know what, for the betterment of our national team at senior level, we're going to play some of the guys that maybe, 17, 18 years old, and we're going to throw them in at the deep end, and like you said, there isn't any relegation in the BBL. So, maybe it takes a brave coach or a brave owner to say, what, the route we're going to go is we're going to develop young English players, British players, and we're going to put, we're not saying that not to be competitive, but, you put them around some good pros and you say, you know what, for the betterment of our national team, this is what we're going to do. Like an example of it is what Tony Garbaletto's doing at Glasgow Rocks. Their whole team is the Scottish national team. And they're playing their whole Scottish national team as Glasgow Rocks, and they're hoping that will be beneficial for their Scottish national men's team, which obviously will play in the Commonwealth Games.
But what isn't it? Do you think it comes down to? It could be a number of examples to be why they don't go down that route. But do you think they have that feeling that maybe that player is, be it raw, not quite ready, as opposed to bringing in somebody for, say, an export from the US or Europe or anywhere to that matter?
Yeah, I can see that and understand it, but I think that we would have a better pro league if you had better British pros in that league. So, like a good example, Justin Robinson has just come back. He's going to play for London Lions next year, who's a GB senior men's team. The more of those kind of guys you get into the system or get into our pro kind of setup over here, I feel like that's going to be beneficial for maybe the younger players coming through as well. We start using we were talking about looking up to the senior men's players. If those senior men's players are, in our British Pro League, surely that should be beneficial for our national team and for the younger generation coming through. I still think I don't know if it will happen. Some coaches do it. They play some of the younger players, or younger players will sit on the bench. But I don't think that, I feel like there is some talent in this country that could definitely play BBL. It's just a matter of, is there going to be a coach or an organisation that's going to give the opportunity to the players? Maybe, and like you said, I've been in the pro setup before, and I know that there comes a lot of added pressure with the pro setup. There's more pressure to win. You might have a general manager or owner of the club that isn't worried about the development of the national team. what they worry about is, winning games and winning championships, which is understandable. It's a different set of pressure at that level. But I think someone was telling me an example. I think it was the French under 20s or the French under 18s play in their whole team play in a pro league. They put all of those players together, put them in a pro league. I think they lost nearly every single one of their games in the pro league, but then they ended up winning the European Championships at their own age group. Things like that for me, that's forward thinking. That's like thinking about development. It's not thinking about the winning. They're thinking about, well, how are we going to develop these players for the national team? How are we going to develop them to become senior men's players? That's forward thinking for me.
I think, James, you could probably see a crossover with that, with, say, the wheelchair game in this country.
Yeah.
The women's team play in our Division 1 together all year round, and that's obviously, and then train.
Yeah.
So at the betterment for looking at long-term development for the Paralympics. So do you think maybe the federation on the able-bodied side should maybe look at that as, well, not really forward-thinking, because it's been, I think that system now has been in there for a couple of years now, but to look at that as maybe a model to see, because they're their most successful Paralympics in Rio to date.
Definitely. I mean, France has their academy INSEP does a kind of similar thing. Like they have their best players from France attend INSEP, which is their like national academy, and all of those players play together all year long, and they have like regional institutes, so like the players that maybe not quite good enough for INSEP, they're at these other regional places where, the coaches that coach at these regional institutes are governed by the federation, so they're all working together, I think that's a model that, has worked for France. There's other national teams that do similar things as well, other national federations. I feel I like that kind of model myself. Is it something that we could put into our country? I'm not really sure. I think it takes a huge amount of buy-in from everyone, from every coach. Also takes, probably quite a bit of funding to be able to do something like having one national, like boarding school, which is just purely for basketball. And they do that through all the age groups. I don't know if we could do something like that. I like that model, but I'm not sure if that's something that we could possibly do over here.
But would you not agree that it goes one step deeper than that in terms of, say, Wales, Scotland, England, Northern Ireland? They all want their piece of their pie, and it's kind of, at times, they're butting heads with the British Basketball Federation.
Well, this is the thing that we've got to all now come together and work together. We're GB basketball now, like that. We've got to find a way to be able to work together and all kind of sing off the same hymn sheet. I don't really understand why, we're still having, it should just be GB basketball now. That's it. We shouldn't have to be, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, and England. It should just be one federation now. That's it. And of course, everyone wants to have their own say and their own, like you said, almost kind of piece of the pie. But, this is the whole reason that we came together, was to have some synergy, to work together, and have a long-term development plan for how we're going to proceed going forward. Hopefully, it's still in its infancy. We're only just really started that, but hopefully this is going to be a positive, and hopefully that we can all work together.
But I think you raise a good point in terms of everybody wants to have their say. However, you can't always please everybody, and I think saying it from a job perspective and probably look at it from the sporting element and look at it from kind of how you would select a player, you're going to pick not always the best player, but the best fit for the role. So maybe, I don't know, for say the board looking at, you're not going to please everybody by having a representative from every country, but having maybe, I don't know, say the best people for the job, but say maybe in a assisting kind of role, have maybe somebody from every other, like the underlying home nations representative, so they can probably better themselves and probably get an expertise and learn from somebody who's had those experiences.
Of course, and that's that's the whole forward planning thing, and like I think that's the way it should be. Like if you have a national team, just using mine, the under 16s as an example, and maybe I pick my staff, and maybe there isn't a representative from one of those home nations, then if the home nation wants to send a coach along to observe and learn, then 100% that should be just done without even having to have a discussion about it. That should be all of us working together to try and be better. I think that's like we're trying to do that with our 16s at the moment. Like we might have only finished 2 weeks ago, but me and I've got a pretty good representation on my staff with, I've got Craig Nichol, who's Scottish coach. I have Ian Jones, who's my video PA and assistant coach. He's from Wales. So, we all, as a group, we try to kind of get this to work together, like Craig's talking about already that he's already going into doing, Scotland under 16s already, like he's going into, but for me, it's like, why are we not doing this as a group already? Like we've got to have this, everyone's got to be trying to work together. I feel like at the moment, I'm not sure we're doing a great job of that. I think we can do a better job of that over this next coming year.
Do you think it's to a certain extent now that maybe the home nations are maybe fixated on short-term thinking of looking at Commonwealth Games and saying this is, to some extent, this is our glass ceiling for our players, and let's not worry about GB because obviously at the moment that door is shut with the Olympics in mind?
Yeah, I can understand. Commonwealth Games is, I don't want to say that that's not important, of course, like it's one of those opportunities for a player, like maybe, like a player that, maybe is not going to make a GB squad, but, has got a good chance of making a Commonwealth Games team. And it is a once in a lifetime kind of opportunity to play at the Commonwealth Games. But, like you said, like you still got to have forward planning, like it would worry me that if all of, a country's resources were going into a Commonwealth Games and there was no forward planning, looking towards, like, the qualifications for an Olympics or a World Cup or European Championships, whatever it might be, the thing that worries me more is, are you putting all the money into men's and women's basketball and leaving out the younger age groups? Like for me, that's where the funding should go towards. It should be the putting the money towards the youth. The younger age groups, putting money into youth basketball more than the senior and senior women's basketball. I feel like like we've just done a preparation for our under 16s, which if I'm honest with you, it wasn't ideal. We could have had a better preparation if we'd had more funding. We've got coaches and players sleeping on gym floors, for weekends because we don't have enough money to book a facility where we can go and stay in a hotel. We don't have that money, so coaches and players are sleeping on gym floors for weekends. And I still think that, this summer we've done a pretty good job as the national teams of, performing pretty well. But, if our if maybe more money was put or more funding was put into those junior programs instead of the senior programs, maybe, we could have been even more successful.
Do you think in that essence the powers that be have the pyramid the wrong way round then, in terms of funding?
Yeah, I think so. I think you'd have to ask them though, like I'm not involved in any of that side of it. I'm not involved in that enough to know where the money goes, like all I'm told is this is how much you're going to get. This is the maximum amount of contact time you'll have with your players. These are the warm-up games you're going to play, and that's it. I don't know where I'm not privileged enough to be able to know the information of, right, this is the amount of money that the national teams have as a whole, and this is how it's divided. This much goes towards the senior men's, this much goes towards the junior programs. But from someone who's involved in the junior national teams and from an outsider looking in, I think that this season or this year, the pyramid was definitely upside down.
But in terms of maybe changing that, and that's probably, if you look at it from any kind of development, is probably, well, you could probably say in British sport across the whole, they've always got it wrong, because you say, this money should, look at football as the example. Why should, I think, and I don't know how much football got, the FA, you're thinking they don't need funding.
Don't need any money. No, and that's the thing. Yeah. I mean, like you said, we've got it the wrong way around in this country for a number of years now. Football doesn't need any money. They don't need any funding. They've got all the funding that they need. They've got the revenue stream that they need. But that's you could argue that about a lot of British team sports. The funding is not being great towards team sports. We're very much geared towards medals at Olympics, at Commonwealths, whatever it might be, and a lot of those are sports that aren't team sports.
But then you could argue on the flip side of that, and I'm not knocking your answer here, that it has proven to work. I'm not saying it. You could see it from both sides of the argument. It probably helps when I'm retired.
Yeah, you can. I've had this argument with coaches before, and we can argue and say. I mean, the thing is, because when you're involved in that sport, and obviously basketball being my full-time job and my biggest passion, you obviously see the issues that come with not having the funding that you think you deserve. But then you also see it, I also see it on the flip side. I watch the Olympics, and when we're performing at such a high level, and I mean, the amount of Olympic medals we've won at the last two Olympics, that's huge. Sometimes you have to be, you kind of have to take a stance of, right, this is the way that we're going to go. We're going to put the money towards these sports. We're successful in these sports. We win medals in these sports. So you can't really, in that sense, you can't really argue with them. It's just frustrating, when you, like you said, we're talking about football, why are they getting any funding? They don't need it, and sometimes some of these sports get money that I think that, we could have half of the money that they're being given, and it would change our sport a huge amount.
But James, could you not argue from a different element? We kind of go like a different way with this, that maybe, well, I know UK sport wouldn't do it, but maybe saying what sport can do for an individual's lifestyle, kind of giving them skills for life, as opposed to looking at it from a predominantly only a performance perspective.
Of course. I mean, team sports, they can give you a huge amount of life lessons going forward. And, a lot of these sports that they're funding, you could argue are elitist sports that most people are never really ever going to be able to, get involved in. So you make that. I mean, that's the argument that I always come back to is, you could change a lot of lives, with the team sports. Basketball has taught me more life lessons than, anything else I've ever been involved with, school, university, college, anything like that. Basketball for me is kind of, given me my, most of my life lessons, and I still continue to use those life lessons, now being a coach. But it's, it's one of those things that we continue to argue about. We always get frustrated about it, and we say, we don't have enough money, we can't do this, we can't do that. But, we can't keep using that as an excuse as well. I think that we always say, we haven't got enough money and we can't do this, and that's the reason that we're not good at this. Then we've got to make do with what we've got. And I think that if that's the case and we don't have the money a lot of the time, then we've got to have everyone working together. If we've not got huge amounts of funding and we have lots of people, not working together, then it makes it so much more dysfunctional. If there are issues and the whole funding issue is a big one, then we've got to make sure that you've got the people at the top working together. Because if you don't have that, and you put on top of that, not huge amounts of funding, then the sport it's not going to grow. It's not going to get better.
But James, do you not think that argument with the funding is a little bit not forward thinking in a way, because that system it's only been there, just over 20 years, whereas before 96 it didn't exist. So is it maybe an easy way out, so to speak?
Yeah, of course. I think that's that's the excuse we always use, is we don't have enough money. Well, if that's the case, then what else are we doing? To try and get more. Like, for example, we say we don't have enough funding. Well, why have we looked at sponsorship? Like all these. These other sports have huge amounts of revenue stream coming in from sponsorship. Do we do anything like that? Do we have deals with, like a big expense for us as a national team at my age group is being able to find affordable hotels for players and staff when we have training camp. Well, have we ever gone to, Premier Inn or one of these groups and said, look, this is our issue. What can you do for us? Like, I don't know. I don't know these aren't, I don't know if these are things that have ever been, looked into, and maybe they have been looked into and we haven't got very far with them, or, they've just been no-goes. But I think the whole funding thing we use as an excuse all the time, like we don't have enough money. Well, do you know what? Some of these national teams in other countries, they don't have huge amounts of funding either, but they seem to be pretty successful. So yeah, we can't continue to use that as an excuse, I don't think. I mean, it's not easy, Obviously, we would like more money because it would make things, easier for all of us. But we got to find other solutions, to these problems. We can't always blame it just on not having enough money.
I think you raised a good point in terms of sponsorship. I think maybe the only quarry from, say, the businesses not maybe wanting to jump on board would maybe be because they don't see it as, what would it be? They're not getting anything in return because there's not the coverage is not as good as it should be retrospectively.
Maybe, yeah.
Like the bigger sports.
Yeah, and like a big thing that I hear a lot of the time is it's not on TV. Like basketball is not on Sky Sports anymore. And I remember when I was first getting into watching basketball in this country, and I used to go to some games, and there's 10,000 people there. This is not like it's not like an end of season final. This is like a regular season game. And I actually found a program from, it was a long time, long time ago. But there was a game where I went to watch it at the Royal Albert Hall, and that was on Sky Sports too. Like, don't get me wrong, like, back then, it was a big deal being on Sky Sports. But once again, like, we can't use that as an excuse. We've got to find ways, to try and be successful. And like, if we really need to be back on TV, then I don't know. Is the product good enough? Is it better than it was back then? You could argue it probably isn't. But it's another issue.
But then, James, could you not argue with not using, say, social media now and doing the likes of, I don't know, Facebook Live, and if you have people within your club that are good enough to be able to produce the product, do it that way? Yeah.
There's so many different ways now, isn't it? And I think the BBL now has, that you can watch the games online a lot of time. I think they have like a way that you can watch them online for you pay a subscription. A lot of teams have Facebook Live now. I know that us at Barking, we're now exploring putting all of our games on Facebook Live. I know that I think Leicester Riders have done some of their pre-season stuff on Facebook Live, and Leicester Riders do a huge amount of stuff. They have a guy there, Joe Pinchin, who's really good at what he does with all the media stuff. And but yeah, there's obviously different ways you could go about, trying to, promote the game, and that could be a way that kind of, attracts more people into the sport. But it's, once again, a lot of times, especially at the higher levels, they're looking for revenue streams. They're not maybe looking for, just to get people in the door. They're trying to make money.
But then you bring up probably a very big problem there. If the clubs are willing to do it, and the federation isn't that a massive problem?
Well, then, yeah, that's the whole thing, isn't it? It's having the federation working with your pro league as well, working together. There needs to be synergy between those two fields as well. You got to make sure that the GB basketball is working together with BBL. That's an important relationship for everything we spoke about today. That is a very, very important relationship. They've got to be working together too.
But I think it's probably, maybe, as you say, people need to be singing off the same hymn sheet, and it's, as you well can attest to, pro teams are very much, I'm not going to generalize, because the likes of, say, the bigger leagues of Spain, Greece, Turkey, to just name them, obviously are not as short-sighted with their contracts. They will offer players, well, we'll say at minimum maybe 2-year contracts, whereas if we look at us as a country, most of the time you're seeing, well, the exports only getting 1-year deals. So I don't know how you can even, from one essence, be able to even have a sustainable product.
Yeah, it's difficult, and pro basketball in Europe at the moment is, it's been quite a difficult time for pro basketball in Europe in general. I know quite a few coaches from Spain, and they're saying, they're having similar difficulties over there. The money's just not there like it used to be. I've seen it firsthand. I was in Denmark, and the first year I was there, we had the most successful season the club has ever had. And then the next season, we think we're getting more funding, more money coming in, and then it's just cut. It's just that, and that's not uncommon to happen in a lot of pro teams throughout Europe. So yeah, it's a difficult time for pro basketball in Europe.
But do you think it comes down to? This is probably a difficult one in terms of people have a number of outlets that they can obviously spend their time on. be it social media. You've got, we'll say countless television programs you can watch, and that's not even including sport.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, yeah, like you say, there's so many different, like you said, there's so many different things people can do these days. Maybe, especially, it's a tough time for everyone, in like economically. Maybe that's one of the first things that goes. Like if you want to go, watch a sports game, that's maybe one of the first things that you're like, what we can do without that. We can, we won't spend, that 20, 30 pounds to get into the sports game as a family to a basketball game. Maybe we'll spend, we need that money somewhere else. So yeah, I mean, economically, I think it's, like you said, there's so many different things now, like you talk about, having, seen it firsthand now with this age group. I mean, it's the first time I've been with this age group, the 16s, but, the amount of times you see, the amount of times they're on their phone, we talk about it being a generation thing, like it's in our generation it was different, like I remember in summer holidays, all I did was go out and play sports, I went to the park, play football, play basketball, whatever it might be, but generation has changed, and obviously it's different now. But I could talk about that all day long. Generation change. Do
you not think it's maybe goes even further than that, and not being generation gap, but being maybe even a societal one? It's become acceptable to obviously do that, as opposed to, and you could probably delve a little even deeper than that. And this is what probably frightens me to some extent. Is obviously PE is not a core subject in school, which I would probably argue, be it from being an ex-athlete, being within the fitness industry, in the long run, I would say health is probably more important than, I would say definitely probably English to a certain extent, because, okay, yes, you need to learn the English language and be able to speak properly. But some of the things, and I had an argument with my mother about this last night. Yes, you need to be able to speak the language, but when are you going to use, I don't know, your grammar in a day-to-day scenario? Yeah. Never really. Yeah. Yes, you have to be able to speak properly. Yeah. You're not going to say, oh, this is an adverb, a noun, a verb within a sentence when you're speaking to somebody in the street.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is, for me, like you said, PE not being a core subject to me is absolute, that's, for me, it's craziness. I mean, I see it kind of both sides. I feel like English, English, math, science, and for me, PE, that's the, those four core subjects is something that, everyone should do. I mean, health and fitness is incredibly important, I mean, I'm shocked these days that, some kids will never do it. They could go through the whole of school and never do any kind of exercise whatsoever. It's kind of is a little bit worrying. But that's kind of the way that it's gone, and there's not much we can do about that. That's the way that this kind of school is now, kids aren't, they're not as, excited now by sports as maybe they were when we were young. I remember when I was at school, I played every sport. I don't think I had a choice either. I don't even remember having a choice. I think I played every sport. I played football, rugby. I played basketball, which was my kind of main sport, and I played everything. I played tennis, hockey, and I played in all those teams, and I don't think I really had a choice. But I think that was that helped me a lot, But yeah, it is definitely a worrying trend.
Would you think, maybe say from a coaching perspective, do you think it needs maybe the academic sphere needs a shake up to kind of tailor it to the modern society that we've become. Obviously, this obesity is right. So to kind of teaching the kids, I don't know, even maybe say at primary school level about what they're eating. Say not say this is PE, but maybe terming it something else.
Yeah. You could. I mean, there was a class when I went to high school in America for 1 year, and we had a class called health, and that was pretty much that class, and that was, you learned about diet, you learned about, hygiene, you learned about, how much exercise you should be doing, all of those kind of things. Maybe that is something that you kind of tailor it towards. But for me, it's like, I just don't know why it was taken out in the first place. If it wasn't broken back then, like, what was the reason for taking it out now? I don't really understand the reasoning behind it. We all know that how beneficial it was for us as kids, playing sports. I don't understand why nowadays that's now, academically that's not important. I don't really understand that. For me, it's not even about, I don't even think we should really be tailoring it towards, a new generation. The benefits are still there, even for this generation, even if we did it the old school way. We've just kind of gone away from it. I don't really understand that myself.
And out of curiosity, James, did you also do home ec when you were in the US?
No, I didn't. No, I didn't do home ec.
But then do you not see that as, from your perspective, obviously being with the national setup, do you think that should be a requirement at school?
Definitely.
As in for the long-term development of the individual? Yeah,
definitely. Home ec is. I remember doing it at school. Not in high school, but in the States. But I remember doing it at my secondary school, and it's another thing. It's important. I mean, these things are kind of not deemed to be important anymore, but I think they are definitely beneficial for younger kids, and don't know why we've kind of gone away from these kind of things, but it seems to be like like you said, it's a worrying trend for schooling going forwards in this next generation.
But do you think it's those core subjects, well, not core subjects, but the ones that are kind of on the periphery? Do you think to some extent, okay, you're not going to please everybody with PE because not everybody likes sport, but obviously if you rebranded it and called it something else.
Yeah, but then it's once again, you get back to the, do you know what? There was times where I went to school, I didn't want to do PE, but sometimes, you kind of have to do things that you don't always want to be, you have to do things that, not necessarily, I feel like that nowadays you can just pick your way through. Like, I don't really want to do that, so I'm just going to do this instead. Sometimes you have to be put in situations where, not necessarily you want to do it, but you have to do it. You know what I mean? There would be times where you went into school and it was, it's snowing outside, and your PE teacher's like, right, we're going out to play hockey, and you're like, but you did it. But now, very rarely are kids put in difficult situations, They're just given the easy route every single time. We talk about, rebranding it and, trying to make it sound better maybe for the kids than what it really is. But for me, I don't even know if they should really be given the choice, That's for me, it's a core subject that should be done. Everyone should learn about, the benefits of exercise, playing sports, the life lessons you learn from sports, all of those things, not necessarily, every kid is going to do it and then go into play, after school football, play for a football team, play for a basketball team, rugby team. But, they still should all do it. That's still part of, that's part of learning. You should still have to do those things, in my view, anyway. And I feel like, sometimes, kids these days are maybe given the easy route too often. Sometimes you have to do things that you don't want to do. That's part of life.
If I use my experience now, James, in terms of going to school in secondary school, I went to American school throughout all the way my secondary education. I think from the outside looking in, and I think this has been raised like on politics shows, which is a different story altogether, about what is the best form of education in the world. Obviously, I was fortunate enough with my parents working for NATO. I did my primary schooling in the Belgian system, my secondary school in the US, and then I came back to do my tertiary education in the UK. So I can kind of, I won't say I'm an expert in kind of which would be the best, but I can kind of look at the pros and cons of each academic system and say, well, this has got its flaws in this, but these are the pros. I think from looking at and kind of coming to my point, I think the American system has got it right in terms of you've got a high school level, you've got to do at least 1 year of PE to even graduate.
Yeah. Yeah, 100% agree. Like it's, like we said, we spoke about, the whole obesity issue, and don't get, I don't profess to be perfect in this sense as well, because when I stopped playing sports, I mean, I wasn't the fittest person at all, I put on quite a bit of weight, and, after you stop playing, I stopped playing completely in my 20s and I put on quite a bit of weight, but, I've actually educated myself into, learning about healthy lifestyle, healthy diet, learning about exercise. Someone at our academy taught me all this stuff. Duncan Ogilvy, he's the strength and conditioning lead for England basketball, and he taught me all this stuff again. And you're never too old to learn, but like you said, it's just it's a worrying trend, and you would hope that the education system would look at this and start to realise there is a serious problem, and they could reverse that, I think, fairly easily. If they just I just think that kids they're sometimes just given too easy a route. Why are they told now that they don't have to do PE? You can just, I mean, that's a worrying thing for me, is you could go a whole education cycle without ever doing a PE class. That is quite worrying.
Well, it's quite bad on that count, because, well, that one you really shouldn't be given a choice, because if they're not doing it, they're really, or you could use the term, they're dossing they're not physically doing anything for that period of time during the day.
Yeah, exactly.
So not you could say they're not even learning anything, if you go down really deep.
Yeah, of course.
But if we kind of come back and go full circle and using that topic there, I think probably a good one for the sporty ones that are listening is probably looking to you tap those resources as much as you can. Be it strength and trying to, like, as you've tested to towards the end, is probably trying to better yourself, be it knowledge base, trying to get, well, at that level, even if it is under 16s and upwards, it's all about those percentages. If you can get 1% over somebody else in the long run, especially once you get to senior level, that 1% is a massive difference.
Yeah, is really important. I think that's one area in basketball. I think we've come on a huge amount in the last 5 to 6 years. Is definitely the strength and conditioning side. I would say that we're definitely one of the better teams. Having seen how some of the other national teams work, I think that strength and conditioning wise, I think we're amongst the best in Europe when it comes to that side of things. So yeah, like you say, those small percentages, we can get, the 1%, if you get, 10 players, 5% better, conditioning wise, that helps your team no end.
But James, some people might argue that is maybe sometimes detriment to the game, because obviously it's no point being fitter than another team if your fundamentals are not sound, is it?
It's true, and you need to find it's about finding the balance, obviously we've come on huge amounts in strength and conditioning field, but then obviously the other side needs to catch up, which I feel like is the side you're talking about, the fundamental side, the coaching side. We bring that level up, then obviously you go from, being an incredibly fit team, but also being fundamentally as good as all the other teams. We then become a very dangerous team compared to all the others. Because that's the one area that I always, when I speak to other coaches, from all around the world, they all say this. A lot of them say the same thing. They say your teams are very, a lot of the time they're very athletically gifted. You have great athletes. But fundamentally you're not very good. Your decision making, your reading of the game isn't particularly good. So if that's the case, then like you said, that side of it needs to catch up slightly. So our strength and conditioning side, I think is very, very good at the moment. The other side needs to catch up. So we need to get, all the stuff we've been speaking about on the podcast today, the coach education, all that stuff. Hopefully then, the basketball side of things starts to catch up.
I think it probably comes down to that big one as efficiency. It's the name of the game. Well, we've said it. It's, and I've kind of argued it on 2 points with another episode, is the name of the game is to score more points than the opposition. But you don't want to be leaking points for the sake of it as well. Yeah,
it's true. Yep.
So last question, James, before we wrap up the episode.
Sure.
If you had to summarize this entire episode into one sentence for people to take away, what would that be?
Oh, that's a good question. We've talked about lots of different things today, haven't we? For me, the big thing I always like in a lot of these the few podcasts I have spoke about, for me, it's coach education. Like for me, is the most important thing in developing a sport. For me, that's the one sentence for me that I kind of always. I'm very, like I said at various points, I'm very passionate about coaching in this country. Basketball coaching, that is, and I really feel like coach education is one area that I think that I'm very passionate about. I feel like that if we can get that part of the things right, and everyone working, synergy working together, I feel like that's going to be a real kind of something that's going to improve our sport no end going forwards.
I think that's a great analogy there, James. So once again, thanks for coming on the Mindset Game podcast.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. And before I forget, I would really appreciate it if you would be so kind as to leave a short written review, as it helps to get the podcast more notoriety and it would be more visible in future to others, and thus helping more people, which my guests and I are all about. Once again, thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time for another episode of the Mindset Game podcast.